Right, so I felt compelled to make this video because over the last couple of months, it does feel like the character of Chad Gable and this whole American-made thing, which more or less only just recently fully started, is kind of being fumbled. Now, if you've never seen this channel before, TLDR, I'm a pretty big Chad Gable fan. That said, I'm here to kind of ask and sort of answer the question of, is Chad Gable currently working as a character? Which in general is a rather tricky question to answer because frankly, I think there are a lot of things that are going well, but also a lot of things that I would personally change. All that being said, if you go on to enjoy the video, be sure to hit the like button down below as it helps me out a ton, and maybe subscribe for more content like this in the future if you're new. Right, so let's first talk about the ascent of Gable, as I'll call it, and what I mean by that is back in 2023, notably around September time, there was this awesome little feud between him and Gunther. If you don't remember, that was over the Intercontinental title, which at that time, it was, in my opinion, the best feud that Gunther had had over the title in his entire reign. Yes, I know some people will say it was Sheamus, but I really love Chad. That said, their initial feud, he didn't win, despite actually scoring a win over Gunther via countout. In their rematch, Gunther did manage to put Gable away for the 1-2-3, making Gable's daughter cry in the process and seemingly setting up a rematch between the two somewhere down the line. That rematch seemed to be teased for WrestleMania, as Chad Gable was entered into a gauntlet match, where it seemed pretty likely he would win, especially as he entered last in the match. However, his opponent was of course Sami Zayn, and if you've been keeping up with modern wrestling, Sami of course won that gauntlet match and went on to beat Gunther at WrestleMania. In particular, this created a phenomenal story for Sami, and also an immediate follow-up feud after WrestleMania with him and Chad. Their initial match was built off of respect from Sami to Chad, as Chad did help Sami train for WrestleMania to beat Gunther. However, after this initial showing of respect by Sami, it seemed that Chad took it another way and instead turned heel, in the process decimating Sami in front of his family, which was very eerily similar to what Gunther had done to him just months ago. From here, the pair would feud for a couple of months with a couple of other names in the mix here and there. However, at the end of it all, at King and Queen of the Ring, Chad Gable was unsuccessful in capturing the Intercontinental Championship from Sami Zayn, and in the coming months, he would even lose all of his best friends and allies in the Alpha Academy who refused to turn to his side, as it simply didn't align with their moral compasses. Chad would blame them, ridicule them, hate on them for all they did and what they didn't do to help him win. This would ultimately be a leading cause in why the Wyatt 6 targeted him on their debut on Raw. Rest in peace to my boy Chad Gable. But just like a phoenix rising from the ashes, Chad wasn't done just yet. He came back the following week, doing a bit of detective work trying to figure out who the Wyatt 6 was, who Uncle Howdy was, which was a funny bit of comedy which Gable is always extremely good at portraying and purveying. However, in the process of Uncle Howdy debuting and him turning his focus to Uncle Howdy and the Wyatt 6 as a whole, the entire Alpha Academy feud with Otis kind of just died out. Seemingly because he kind of got new friends in Julius and Brutus Creed, as well as Ivy Nile, but in general, a hot feud between him and Otis would have been pretty good in my opinion, especially considering the pair have actual real life history, and of course all of the months and months of history that we've seen them have on TV. This immediately, for me at least, kind of detracts from the Chad Gable character. He's not trying to get back at the family who abandoned him, and instead is focused on a man who is trying to get back at him for abandoning his family, but also not, it's weird. Like, I think this story overall is pretty good because Uncle Howdy as a character is very focused on the idea of family and also like kind of keeping the people close to you, which I think kind of makes sense considering they're playing a lot off the death of Bray Wyatt. Uncle Howdy's entire character is about the idea of grief, essentially. And the ones that you grieve the most, of course, are your family. And when Chad Gable would call the Alpha Academy his family despite doing what he did to them, it makes a lot of sense why Uncle Howdy would take some issue with how he was phrasing things and doing things with his quote-unquote family. However, as previously mentioned, Chad Gable would form American Made, aka him, Julius Creed, Brutus Creed, and Ivy Nile, and they would begin to feud with Uncle Howdy. Now, Uncle Howdy, Nikki Cross, Eric Rowan, Joe Gacy, and Dexter Loomis are a pretty sick faction all in all. Very similarly to American Made, I think overall and in general as a pure concept, I think they're incredible. But there's a pretty big issue in their current feud against one another, and in my opinion, it's that both teams kind of need to win. Like, you can't be telling me Chad Gable is this phenomenal performer and every single time he's in a semi-big match, he just continually loses. And at the same time, you can't have this brand new faction that's a bunch of spooky cool characters also just lose all the time. See, to me, neither of these two teams should have been feuding with one another. And the very simple reason for that is because both teams needed to win here. Like, I'm not saying a loss for either team destroys them, quote unquote, or ruins their characters, but you gotta admit, it doesn't really make a ton of sense to put two guys in a position where they both need to win a match and then have them against each other. Like, I'm not saying you should just have the Wyatt 6 go after, I don't know, like Xavier Woods or something, but like, to me, it just didn't make a lot of sense to have them go after Chad Gable. And storyline-wise, I think it's actually a pretty good fit all in all. But I really feel like they should have waited like a couple of months, at least let Chad get a couple of wins, and also let the Wyatts kind of prove themselves a bit more before having them just trample all over American Made like they're nothing. And right now, it kind of feels like that's what we're getting. Like, in every single beat-up angle, they've been the ones on top. And the Uncle Howdy versus Chad Gable match on Raw this past week, he was on top. And it feels like Chad just can't get a break. Like, he had a phenomenal story to go after Gunther again, and that just didn't happen. He had a great story to take the belt off of Sami Zayn and eventually have the Alpha Academy maybe turn with him, or have the Creeds join him a bit earlier and help him win the title, and that didn't happen. And so instead we have him against Uncle Howdy in the Wyatt 6, and really I can't help but feel like this isn't the right position for Gable to be in right now. Like, don't get me wrong, I'm actually really high on Braun Breaker, I'm glad he won the title, but I do think it probably should have been Chad, and Braun probably should have won it a couple months down the line, maybe around Survivor Series, and maybe by that time we get to a Howdy versus Gable feud. But then Chad also feels a bit elevated by having the title, and also by, you know, winning some matches. Because again, I would like for you to recall for me when the last time Chad Gable won a big match. So to me, to answer the question that this video is trying to ask in the first place, is Chad Gable working? No, I'm not really high on what's happening, but I do love American Made. I love the idea of them, and I like that they're a tandem altogether. But having them just be the fodder for the Wyatt 6 just to beat down for their first feud just feels kind of bad to me. I'm not saying they can't turn it around by any means. I'm sure they could. You know, they could heat Gable up, get him a couple of wins, and maybe get him in the IC title picture again. But as of right now, I'm really not feeling this feud. I again love both acts individually, but together they're kind of like oil and water. At least at this current point in time. And maybe my feelings will change, and I really hope they do. Because frankly, I love Chad Gable, I love Bo Dallas, I love all of the people on both sides of these factions. But I really can't help but feel like because both guys really need to be winning these matches and these feuds, that it really didn't make a lot of sense to put them together right now. But those are just my thoughts. What do you think? Let me know in the comments down below. And hey ho, while you're headed down that way, it would help me out a ton if you consider leaving a like on the video, as well as maybe subscribe for more content like this in the future. For now at least, I'm gonna go dip and get ready for Bash in Berlin. I hope you guys are looking forward to it too. However, as always, I hope you stay safe. And that was Dylightful.